Here we are. We are live. It's been a minute since I've been live with someone other than myself. So I'm really, really excited about this. So, as usual, welcome. If anybody pops into the live and you want to shoot us over a comment, say hello. We'll see them on our end. We're over on StreamYard, but we'll see them. And I, as usual, have an amazing person with me. Joining me for the Selfcare is My Job show. This is my good friend, Toya, and she's joining me today. Why? Because she's one of my newer besties, but nonetheless, I feel like I've known her for 7 lifetimes. And we're gonna get into it, but in a nutshell, our relationship is for me such a beautiful quintessential example of what true co-regulation is supposed to look and feel like. And it is interesting that we haven't even known each other that long in relative to everything else, right?
And how we
But
met too.
right, so we should talk I think we should talk about that for just a moment.
Yeah.
But anyway, but before we get into all that, so just give us a little intro of yourself, what you do, what do who are you and what do you do with your day, and what's life look like for you these days?
Really basic. Mom, wife, yogi, wine lover, auntie.
Just a basic
That's
bitch.
it.
No.
Family, yeah. It's like family and working and that kind of stuff, Not
Yeah.
nothing too crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, which is beautiful. It's not a just situation. That's a lot of things you just named, by the way, and you know that.
And
But
there's probably a lot more, but
yeah, exactly. We don't have all day. We just have a little while. I know. That's the thing. We all wear many, many hats. But so let's talk about how we met. So me and Latoya know each other from the wine world.
Mhm.
And so we were both previously wine consultants with a company called Traveling Vineyard. And I had such a good, wonderful 5 years doing wine tastings with Traveling Vineyard. And this is a perfect example of how I met some of the coolest fucking people. Really. And that's only a small part, I think, for me of the whole experience. It was so fun. It's just not really in alignment with what and not even, I don't even have the capacity to do it anymore if I wanted to. But yeah, so do you remember? Do you remember? I think we met for the first time in person at a convention, correct?
I think so.
I just remember, wait, you were going to wait online for some Game of Thrones pop-up or some shit,
That was when
right?
we were in DC. Yes.
In DC, that's what it was. I was I couldn't remember which convention, it was DC.
Well, they said
And I so wanted to go with you. I was being detained at the bar and you're going and I'm oh, but okay. I wanted so desperately to go. But yeah, so we didn't even really have time to connect on that trip at all in any major way. And the strange thing is that we didn't connect on any major way until we were both kind of not maybe not having left the company completely, but just in a separate forum.
Yeah.
And then thank goodness for our mutual friend Jen, who was excuse me, the three of us need to spend some time together. She was the seer.
He was. Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
She just knew, and she still knows lots of things. Who also, Jen Gilardi, who was also a guest of mine on this show in a previous episode, in a Mom Bomb episode, because she's mom of the year over there. Look up, want to be her mom life when I grow up.
It's pretty amazing.
But yeah, so this is how we know each other. And we just want to give the lay of the land, right? So what happens, and again, if you're listening to this and this resonates with you, send it over. Have you ever met someone and then been oh my God, we are one. We have the same brain. Right? How does that resonate for you?
We're on the same wavelength.
Right. You knew it. But like in what way? Like did this click for you like it did for me? Like, "Oh, okay. Like we
Well,
get
yeah,
each other."
because, we kind of we talk the same too. We're like sort of loud, and we do a lot of hand talking, and we, on occasion speak like truck drivers. And that's just it, there was just a connection right away.
Right away.
And then
Well, that's the thing.
once we
Totally like down to earth,
yeah,
like
once we get
person.
into what we're doing, once we sort of found out that we were both on that same path, that was like really it. That was where it was just like, oh well, this is the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah. But that's it makes sense, right? Because you're initially drawn to someone, um, like when you have similarities, right? And like when or when your personality is not so off-putting for the other person. When they get you, right?
Yeah.
Like and let's just normalize that for a second. Like not everybody is going to get you. I cannot tell you how many people I come in contact with and I am just too much for those people, and that is okay. Like that is okay. Like we do get I think into this like freaking spin cycle of like trying to please everyone and trying to curtail yourself, whether you're opening up or going inside or whatever it is, just to like fit in with the group. But the thing is that once you let your freak flag fly and people start to see you and really hear you, then you actually attract the people who are in alignment with you.
Right.
So I fully, fully, wholeheartedly believe that that happens when something like our friendship is generated from a place of that, right? Of a place of like really gen genuine openness and like vulnerability and just being like, "Hey,
Yeah.
diss me."
Yes, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
Um, okay. So here's what happened. Now you have the you're up to speed on the fact that, Sam has done some work over the years, which has allowed her to open up and find her tribe, therefore, and Latoya is a major, major part of that. Um, and we have been like co-regulating, really. Like we have been not as often even as would like, right? But and we're gonna change that. But we have been there for each other over the past like couple, whatever it is, the past year or something, that we have been, connecting more. And the other day, I had a really hard day the other day. Like I had a fucking hard day the other day. And it's interesting to me because I'm really lucky in that I actually do I have like a good group of like 6 or more, even like core friends that I have known for a long time or shorter periods of time that have evolved with me, right? Like that I haven't um like I haven't scared into the trees with my with my like
Yeah.
you know, my mental health journey, my own personal stories, my openness, my, all of this. Um, so I'm just, again, making sure that like I express gratitude for that because like I realize that not everybody has that.
Mhm.
So in that moment that I was having the other day, I texted 2 people and Latoya was one of them. Because what happens is when we're having a tough time, not only are we able to co-regulate and not only are we able to like kind of talk each other off a ledge and help each other see like reality, like come back to the truth of things, right?
Yes.
But we are both kind of geeking out over new science in mental and emotional wellness these days, collectively.
Mhm.
So I've talked online plenty about how I'm going down the trauma rabbit hole, which is basically a really weird way of saying that, like, my eyes are open, right? My eyes are open to a background and understanding as to why we experience things the way that we do and why things can be so hard, especially change, especially when we're trying to shift things in our lives and it just gets really sticky and muddy and rigid sometimes.
Mhm.
So tell me, before we dive into exactly what we were talking about, I want to hear from you, like why and how, because everybody has like a background to why the hell like this is even a thing that you're getting into, like the wellness and emotional space. By the way, I forgot to say something. Congratulations, Latoya is officially a certified yoga instructor.
Woo! Yeah,
Forgot
so
to say that at the beginning,
that's
and like,
totally
wow.
it's very exciting, yeah.
It's really, really exciting, and I'm excited for you. But this was a part of it for you as well, right? Like one of these things where it's like, okay, I see the value in yoga as a modality, and now it's like going to be, it's just amazing how it shifts everything, and now it's a major part, will be, I'm sure, a major part of your life and your offering.
Oh, yeah.
Um but so yeah, like even what led you to that, and or what led you into this sort of beginning stages that you're in of exploring um trauma and the effect that it has on people, and just like mental wellness as a whole, and your interest in this.
I guess it has to start with my family. I have a lot of, people that are close to me that, we're just going through all these things, and even myself, like I was just having like a self crisis of like, what am I doing? Like every time I'm at a job, I love it for 5 minutes and then I'm like, I gotta drop this like a bad habit. This is terrible. And it's like I sort of like was trying to figure out how I can just be happier.
Mm,
And that sounds like so like, oh, be happier. Like, but it's like really important and it's a really big deal. And it's really not that easy to just be happy every day.
mm-mm,
Or at least strive to, not everybody's going to have like the best day ever, but at least, in working to do that. And so I started to reach out and search for all these different modalities, like figuring out ways that I would be able to regulate myself. Um, because you start to tell yourself lies, like you start to tell yourself stories, and it prevents you from moving forward in anything that you want to do. And so, yeah, I started doing all this trauma work and reading and then somehow found out that you were doing it and sort of reached out to you. And then that's how the yoga part came in. That's all on you. So that is you.
my bad,
So
no.
thank you for that. And just being so the reality is like in my mind, I really want to be able to like create a space because it's not just the trauma work, the talking, the therapy, the meditation. It's also about movement of your body. It's so important. Like it sounds so like silly, but like when I'm like really stressed out, I like do this thing where I like move my whole like this part, like where you like massaging your organs, and I swear it releases something. And in doing that, it's like that is such a simple thing. So like all the mental health and the trauma work, yeah, it is hard and it's a lot of work, but there's also like a little piece. There are little pieces of it that are really not hard and they're really easy, and you could do them every day, and those will help as you move forward into the harder stuff. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Like just even all of that, it's so like interesting to me, and it's like how you really have a lot of power over your own body and your own.
completely.
You just have to clear out space, which is what we talked about. Clear out that space and be present, and you'll be able to sort of see it that way.
Yeah. You took the words right out of my mouth. I was just going to say, we have, like you said, we have a lot more control over how we feel day to day, moment to moment, than we have been led to believe, I think, in many cases.
Mhm.
Um, and so, we tell ourselves, you know, this is just life, we've absorbed all of these like random statements over time, right? Of just like life is hard, deal with it. Or like, or even the fact that like the harder life is, like the more like badge of honor you get or something like that. Like almost like it's rewarded in some way to struggle. but like it doesn't have to be that way. We have so much control over it, and the body is, again, like this is it's interesting, a little irritating to me sometimes, but interesting that this is becoming, the awareness is now starting to become elevated on the importance of the body, right? Because we're also kind of, I mean, you have to, be honest about it. We kind of, I think we're painted this picture as far as like growing up, you believe that all your thoughts run the show, right?
Mhm.
And and even the like, not even really differentiating between a thought and an emotion. And even the emotions, like I feel like there's always, I don't know about you, but like I've always known, and it wasn't just from the Disney movies. Like I've always known that our emotions generate from the heart space, right?
Yes,
And I
100%.
don't think, that there's something to be said about that too. Like when people like me and you like connect on that level, there's like a knowing that like you have an inner knowing that you're very connected to, so do I, and therefore we can communicate on a level that is a little different than like a sort of a superficial acquaintance level type of communication. So I segued a little bit there, but when it comes to, the body, it's like, yeah, we're taught that, like, is all this stuff just going on in the brain all the time, and the brain is, like, just the control center, it, like, and it's, like, the epitome of anything that it comes to mental health, and now there's all of this new science around not only the communication between your gut and your brain, but also your heart and your brain, and so we're expanding just from that science, but then, of course, further and further into exploring, especially in the yoga space, right? Exploring your fascia and like the intelligence of your fascia. For me, that was like the trajectory of like my um sort of geeking out process over this,
Mhm.
was like, ooh, okay, first like yoga, right? Okay, fine. Now we're talking about energy centers. So now we're in the body right away, because as much as there are going to be people listening to this who hear the word chakra and it's like, no,
Yeah,
that's woo,
leaving.
like I'm leaving, right, right, right.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
there is literally a reason why we call this the subtle body, and it's not, it ain't fake. It's very, very real, and it's a part of your nervous system. So you have that connection. Then expanding, again, another thing that's super real. Fascia is a real thing. It's
Mhm.
actually intelligent tissue, intelligent, um, connective tissue, which again, I just become a geek over, like, immediately, like, holy shit. So when we talk about trauma being held in the body, sometimes I think, in many cases, we are talking about, um, in that space, that fascia that basically is literally everywhere. And then you take it deeper when you actually, okay, like, sort of set, we go that route, and then we come back to, like, actually all of our systems in the body, the nervous system being one of them, your, circulatory system, like I said, the gut, all of these things. Oh, hello, all of a sudden we're back in, quote, "the real body."
Mhm.
Like, our actual parts are more intelligent, is my point, right? Way more intelligent than we think. One of the coolest things that I'm geeking out over lately is the fact that, for example, and this goes right back to what you were saying about moving your center, right? Um, not only your, how do I say this? Not only your center, but your sacral region, like your lower belly, your lower abdomen, your seat, your root, this whole space, right?
Mhm.
Um, is this super sensitive area that, when you think about it, is the basis of our center of gravity,
Mhm.
right? Like your core is like your, like if you have a super like weak core, like you really don't have a very stable center of gravity and balance, which means that it's connected to safety. And this is how I'm like geeking out lately over the fact that that area and your psoas, the muscle in the front of your hips, which is why the yoga teachers are always talking about releasing your hip tension and everything.
Mhm,
So in that region is a center of gravity. It is a sense of safety that we either have or don't have, or depending on the spectrum you're on, right?
mhm,
And it comes right back to your ability to regulate emotionally and mentally, and also how like the response of your nervous system.
mhm,
So, anyway, again, I digress, but the point is, makes complete sense that, like, I talk about the inner knowing that you probably, like, have always had on some level. Like, now, I don't know how long you've been doing that, right, with your body of just like, let me just move around my center. I always talk about in my classes about how when we're kids, we get into like all these weird shapes, and your parents are like, stop doing that. You look weird,
It's like a
or you're
weirdo.
going to get stuck that way, or some shit. And it's like,
Yeah,
the body is pretty freaking intelligent. There
mhm,
is a reason why your body intuitively wants to move in a certain way. And it is to create balance or a release, which again is a perfect way to get back in to what we were just saying before about what we were talking about, right? But I'm going to give you a chance to respond to that first before we talk
I
about our conversation.
basically are saying exactly what I'm saying because this is what we do. Just say what each other is supposed to
Well, yeah. So I guess that's the downside of having this conversation on the show, is that only one of us needs to speak.
yeah, I'll just do this. Mhm. We'll switch, and then you do it.
I mean, yeah, and this is the importance of finding your tribe, ladies and gentlemen.
Mm,
So, so yeah, I mean, and going straight into that concept, right? So I was having a day, man. I was having a moment. Now, like, I know if anybody's listening and thinking to themselves, what do you mean Sam's having a moment? She's, the self-care fucking queen over there, and she's got her shit under control. Well, you would be wrong. Because we all have. It doesn't matter,
right.
like this is how I always put it, right? I feel like if you have a self-care practice, which admittedly I haven't been wonderful with lately.
Mhm,
And it happens. But if you have like sort of a toolbox for that, I think it's easier to get into even a space of like, oh, like of awareness where it's like, oh, I need to like rely on I need to balance and self-regulate right now based on what's going on. And the further away you get from even having anything that looks like a self-care practice and really being connected to yourself, the harder and harder it is to have that awareness at all. So that's why I also call myself like Miss Awareness all the time, because it's just like, well, I have that at least. I can't guarantee about anything else, but I'm pretty fucking aware of my situation.
which I think that's
um
like the first, like, awareness is the first part. Yeah,
yeah.
I have it too. And guess what? I can be aware of it all day long, but it's what I choose to do with the awareness next is what's going to allow me. And this is exactly like what happened on the phone. It was like you were telling me everything that I know that you know, but you just couldn't get out of the awareness.
Mm-mm.
You were just stuck in it
So
basically.
the overwhelm is
Yeah.
what we were talking about, that and that gets you stuck, right? And like and we were also saying a bunch like, "Ugh, I know too much." Like I kept saying it. I know too much. Because and this is not to like pat myself on the back or like even like qualify myself in any way at all. But it's just a matter of like you say, I know too much means like the level of awareness is there.
Yeah.
And so being able to not only being aware that I have hit that space of overwhelm
Mhm.
and am feeling that actual visceral um response in my body of stuckness, as you just said, or like a frozen type of feeling. um the awareness is there. So also the awareness of what do I do about it? Like, okay, obviously the next step would be what do you do about it? But it is a perfect example of how that doesn't always translate to really being able to take action at all, because the response that I'm literally in is stuck,
Mhm.
frozen, like frozen, freeze trauma response.
Mhm.
Do not know what to do next, even though my higher self would probably have all the answers. In that moment, I am here and like I can see, but I can't move, if that makes sense,
Yeah,
right?
I feel like what you're saying, your higher self was what made you reach out to someone. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, so you may not have like down here unregulated regular self, you were here, but all that work and higher self said, okay, in the back here, you need to reach out to your person, whoever it is, or your people. And that's sort of, I feel like that's how we ended that whole conversation, was about the fact that like, you're doing all of this trauma work, which allows you to be aware of it, but it doesn't allow you to share it, like to sort of release a little bit, you know? So I think we were saying like there was like two parts of this. It's like one is the like the space, like the creating the space for yourself. Okay, so like I have this space to be present or whatever it is. And I think I said too, like creating your own space is not like sitting on a meditative, on a pillow and meditating. That if that is yours, that is yours. But a space to pull you out of something you're so in. So all of that trauma work, all of the learning you're doing, you need to step out of it, take a walk. That's your
Mm.
space. Play a video game. That's your space. Watch an episode of Friends, if that's your space. Like whatever it is to pull you from there so that you don't get overwhelmed. And then that second part is, yeah, having that space with someone that you trust. And you said it to me, or like, I have to call you because you and I are on that same level of like, if I call someone and don't, and basically, I don't want to say unload, but if I say all of this stuff to them, they're going to look at me like, what? So you have to find um, like a tribe or a circle of people that are sort of on that same level with you, so that when you are quote unquote unloading or just sort of just trying to release what's stuck here, you can do it and feel safe and not feel judged and not, not overthink what you're trying to say, because you just have to get it out. You just have to release it. And then you can start, then you can come back, recenter yourself, and then start again.
Mhm.
Or figure out what you need to let go of.
Right, exactly. What are the next steps?
Mhm.
Exactly, whatever that might look like. Completely. And what I was thinking while you were saying that, um, so yeah, the unloading, which was complete I mean, I have no problem with that with that phrase. I really don't, because it's like, yeah, I gotta back up the fucking truck. Like, I gotta back up the truck and just like zoop, let it out. And admittedly, there are I don't want to say there are probably more constructive ways of doing it and so on and so forth. I mean, hey, if you have someone who can hold that space for you, that is not only something to be grateful for 100%, but it is there for you and it is okay to do so. Um I think so many people struggle with probably two things as far as like actually discerning like who those people in their life are that are safe, that can hold a space for them. So they either think that they are a burden if they unload in that way, right? So you won't even let it out on anyone because you have somewhere, somehow, someone taught you that you are a burden, that your emotional, your crazy bitch self or whatever, right? But your emotional self is a burden that was taught to you in some way. Um, so you refrain from sharing because of that, or you refrain from sharing because of a fear of just simply being vulnerable.
Mhm.
And even though I think, they sound like two similar things, I actually think that they're two separate things. Like you can it's almost like level A and level B. Like you if you can get over the fact that you might be taking up someone's time or like, dumping onto someone's plate or something like that, um Then you got to next deal with how comfortable are you with being vulnerable and actually opening up about what is going on. A lot of people also just like can't find the words even because why? Because we just don't have the practice doing it. We just don't do it. So like you don't have the practice. So a lot of times a release it can look like so many things. For a lot of times for me it looks like journaling.
Mhm.
I mean, that was a practice that held me for a really, really long time. And now I've found that my journaling ends up turning into like a brainstorm session. All of it, like it very quickly derails. And suddenly I'm brainstorming like a course or something about what I'm actively integrating. So
Which is
then I
also,
get very frustrated.
but look at it this way, it's also a really great thing because,
Yeah.
you're that is the whole point of what you're doing, is to be able to help people. At the end of the day, that's what you're trying to help people, period. And I don't think you're the only person working in this space that goes through that exact sort of thing where isn't that like what journaling is about though? It's sometimes you just write, you don't even know what you're writing, and then you go back and read it and you're like, oh,
Like, oh, interesting.
all
Yeah.
right. I didn't realize I was actually feeling that way. Or, wow, that looks like a great idea. I probably think I can bring that into my everyday life or whatever. So,
Mhm.
I think it's a good thing, even though it makes you frustrated sometimes. I
Yeah.
feel like it's something that can be used for good for sure.
I mean, yeah, no, I'm in no way poo-pooing journaling. It is for me, it's always been an extremely therapeutic practice, whether it's that or like trying to creatively express myself in some way. Sometimes there's a song or a chant that needs to,
Mhm.
piece together, over the course of a day of just like jotting like random things down. And then there's like that kind of beautiful, like tangible out, like making something beautiful out of something that's a mess,
Mhm.
that's really, really therapeutic. But, you know, scraping past all of that, what most of us have been taught is the way to release is to vent. And so venting is great. And there's a place, I think there's a place for that. We just have to be really careful about, and this is like for anyone listening who like doesn't quite have what we have, right? Like doesn't feel like they have like a connection or a community where they can really safely
Mhm.
do that unloading and release and not feel like they're a burden and feel like they belong, right? And there's that other piece of it too of like, like we said before of not having the other side of the conversation look at you like, are you an alien? Like where did this come from, right? Um but yeah, so we just have to be like it's a good way to kind of discern, I think, who are the people that are going to really be in alignment for you and helpful um from on a deeper level for you versus the people who are really just there to bitch and complain with you, to be
Mhm.
quite frank, right? And a lot of us get wound up in the space of like, okay, here's my group of friends. And yeah, I have my group of friends to vent with and stuff like that. But are you venting on like again, time and a place for everything, but are you venting on like a kind of superficial level? Is it almost like a trauma bond or like a bonding over like very cheap energy, like that bitching and complaining energy? I have been there. I catch myself going there still to this day.
Oh, same. But you know what I noticed too now that in this space is now, so I think on the other end of it, whether you're a coach or not or whatever, you're starting to be a coach, sometimes when people are venting, so you also have to know, again, that space, know who these people are. So if they're venting, I'm immediately like trying to change their psyche. And it's like, whoa, they're not ready yet for that.
Mhm.
You have to I almost have to stop myself and be like, okay, okay. I can hear, let them vent. And then you sort of have to very delicately sort of say some of the things that should maybe be said, but some people get over. It's the same thing when not venting, but when you're really having an issue and you're talking to them about it, and they're like, you looking at you like you got three heads. On the other end of that, when they're venting to you and you're explaining to them, they look at you the exact same way. So it's
Right.
like, okay. So you could, it's not to say like don't ever be a friend to those people. You have to listen, but you also have to know like, okay, that might be too much for them at that moment. You know what I
Right.
mean? So it's like that's why like when you have someone like we have each other, I can say whatever I want, you can say whatever you want, and it's sort of like, okay, you're gonna be all right. We're gonna
I know whatever yeah. I know what has always helped me in that space, and I don't think that and this is talking about from the other side, right? Like you telling me what to do about the situation I'm unloading about, right? Um, because we can both look at both sides. I think it's always helped me that I have an ability to understand people's intentions. And I think that some people get lost. If you are in a space of like the blame game a little bit and you are in a space of being a little bit defensive, which again comes from, it's not like to point fingers or to categorize people because I hate doing that. There's a root cause of everything. But if you're in that space and it could be hard for you to understand that what this person is coming at you with is well intentioned,
Mhm.
right? And I've always been able to see that. And then from the other side of things, if you're someone, and this is just like, for anybody who's like just popping in, like, what are we talking about? Like, this is like communication 101 type of conversation that we're having right now in a way, because things get lost in friggin' translation real easily. I
Mhm.
mean, real easy like. But yeah, from the other side of things, what I what I have been what I have learned from a lot of my mentors over the years is kind of like that waiting for the invitation,
Right.
right? And instead, and I had to work on this too. I had to work on my listening because I like to talk. I had to I had to work on my listening.
Mhm.
I'm very, very deliberate at this point in life about waiting for the invitation to offer my response. And whether or not that person is really inviting you to give them the real deal or whether they're looking for that trauma bond. In a lot of cases that person is just looking for someone to um not every time, but many people are really just looking for someone to, validate their experience, which is also fine. Like, actually, I feel like that's a start probably on any level,
I
but
would say
don't do it unless you really feel that way, and the only reason I say that is because on the one hand of being sort of delicate with the in the situation and waiting for your invitation and all of that, on the other hand, what I've come to learn is that no one will ever change unless they're pushed. And I know that that doesn't sound like very trauma informed, but I don't mean like a hard push. I
mhm.
just mean like the kind of push where it's like, okay, well, I don't really appreciate this is not the type of communication and this is not the type of relationship like that I want us to have. So like I'm setting my boundary, like I don't want to like have these trauma bonding conversations with you. I would prefer my friendships be more deep and like more just more to them than
Mhm.
just having these venting sessions, right? So when you for example, right, when you set a boundary with somebody like that, I don't really want to have this conversation over and over again, like that type of thing. It's just an example of you very gently pushing them by setting your boundary, pushing them back a little bit towards into themselves so that they eventually over time might have the opportunity to take a look at what's going on for them, especially because like you said, you can't change anybody. You can't get in there and just be like, "Good, you good now." No.
Even though sometimes it feels like it. You're like, "Yeah." It's like, "No, you no, no.
Yeah.
Wait. Patience."
Yeah, it is about patience. It's hard. But So, that being said, yeah, we've been able to develop, like, this very open, honest, vulnerable path of communication between us. And one thing that came up, like I said, as Latoya was talking me off a ledge, like, she was basically what she was doing was she was bringing me back home, right? Because you get to a point where, like you said, the only thing that I can do, like, it's a freeze response. There's like a paralysis that happens in a way.
Mhm,
And you can't, and if you're listening to this, and you feel like you've ever experienced something, maybe it doesn't feel quite this way in your body, only because many of us aren't that connected to the body unless we really do the work to get there. Um, so you might not feel it viscerally, but when I say freeze, I'm talking about where you are like in that situation where you're like the anxiety is so thick that you don't know what the next thing to do is. And so really that's the simple it makes sense, right? Like all I have the energy or mental capacity to do right now is to make a phone call or to send a text message.
yeah.
And then ideally, I have a friend who just picks up the phone like Latoya, like, "This bitch needs to talk."
Well, this is
Um
a very long text. And I remember I told you too, I had got up that morning and I was like getting ready or whatever, and you popped into my head. And I said, I have to call her because we have not connected in a little bit. And I'm not even joking. A half hour later, you texted me.
Mhm. And that's another part of it, right, is having, like, just coming back to, the importance of, like, having a circle and having people that you can depend on and that you can really, really be your true authentic self with.
Hmm.
And, I'm just, like, emphasizing that because I think, my hope is that many of us have friends who we feel, that we can be real with, right? But I guess I would, in a way, invite anybody who's listening to this to pay closer attention, perhaps, to who those people are that you can truly be fully vulnerable and authentic with without them, again, looking at you like you're an alien. And start even just like I always say this, right? Like coming back to just sort of like what we're trying to attract, right? It's like just the act of starting to discern in that area will start to like naturally weed out your circle, right? Like, oh, okay, like just the simple idea of differentiating, like, okay, I can be that kind of real with pretty much only like this person and this person. Now you're spending ideally more time doing that with those people. And so therefore that tribe or that circle or that space that you're trying to create for yourself is going to amplify because that's where your energy is, that's where your focus is.
Hmm.
So, and I feel genuinely like that happens to me continually. Like the more clear I get, the more discernment I use, the more clear I get on what I want and don't want
Hmm.
will allow me to send my energy and focus to what I do want, and then that more of that appears. It's like continuous, I ain't going into some secret shit over here. As me and my husband were carrying on the other day of the I don't think the secret aged very well. I don't think it aged very well. Me coming from the company that published it and being like, "I remember when that came out," and everybody was like, "Okay, so it's just my thoughts?" Again, full circle, right? It's just my thoughts? It's like, "No, we gotta get into the body." Um, but yeah, just coming back to that idea of like that we said in the beginning, by way of that, you have control over like what is going on here. And I think that's the point. This show is about self-care, and a lot of times self-care is thought of as a thing that you do and then it's overwhelming because it's like here's another thing I have to do,
Yeah.
right? But there's also like this whole other space of just kind of like again like accumulating and connecting to that awareness of what like what I want and what I don't want, and just subtly, it's like subtle self-care, right? Of just like starting to discern, like, who am I going to call
Well,
in
that's
those moments?
self-care. Self-care is the care you have for yourself to allow people to come in to your life, to allow, I mean, the bottom line is, you're at the end of the day, you're just trying to be your true authentic self, because that's the only way other people around you can feel like they can be their true authentic self. I mean, ever since I have made shifts in that way, my household has changed dramatically. And it's, I'm not even doing anything like, crazy bananas or whatever, but I mean, the subtle changes I've made, the moving my body, the that, nobody, it's like working out. It's like, ugh. But then when you do it, it feels so good. So you're setting this example. So your kids see it, your spouse sees it, then they want to say, hey, mom seems like she's in such a great mood. Maybe we should do something like that. You know what I mean? But again, I digress. It goes back to, again, the care for yourself is allowing people in, and you letting yourself be vulnerable, but only for the people that, make you feel safe. And that
Mhm.
is quite a thing.
That's another good first of all, I don't think anybody in any of these conversations I've had on this show has ever put it quite so simply and perfectly of like self-care is the care you have for yourself. So I want to thank you for that because it's again, it does get very jumbled up in like now it's part of the to-do list, right?
Right. Like put a
So
face.
it's like more like what you do as a result of the care you have for yourself.
Right. Yeah.
So thank you for that. But then yes, the idea that all we can do is like set the example
Mhm.
and hope that that kind of like energetically shifts for other people. Um and even as coaches, right? Because we're both in, early stages of coaching, of our coaching offering, and it's like, you know, again, like we are guides. We are coaching, like we are guides. There isn't any little like trick there is to getting in someone's body or mind or spirit and flipping a switch on or off. Like it has to be done on their own. So, and that's what I think is so cool about like even having this show, right? Is just like little seeds that can be planted in the back of someone's head and then it just kind of like roots when it's ready, and it's like these very subtle shifts. We get really lost too in like wanting things yesterday and there's just this instant gratification that we're like attached to, right? So you have that type of a shift that you can create for the people that you love, like you said, and the people who um who are in alignment with you and are like on the journey with you like we are, right? Um and then there's also the piece of absolutely like when you start to prioritize yourself and speak your truth and start to set boundaries and start to feel worthy of having that care for yourself, not only will you maybe influence other people, but you give other people permission, is what you said. And that's huge.
Mhm.
Like, I feel like that is probably for me, like 80% of what I do and want to be doing
Mhm.
is just giving specifically other women permission to step outside of what we're told we're supposed to look and feel like every day and what we're supposed to be doing with our lives every day
Mhm.
and just be an example of that it's okay to deviate from that. And really, I mean, that expands, right? That expands to basically like everyone, even men too, right? Like it's okay. Like you can cry. You can cry. You can be vulnerable. You can have feminine attributes. Women, you can let down the masculine feminine attributes that you've had to acquire to not to feel accepted in this world. It's like you can come back to your feminine attributes. You can I don't want to say demand, but you can start setting boundaries about what you are and aren't willing to do on your day to day. Like there are things that we don't even realize that we are just like shoved in these boxes and we're on this conveyor belt.
Yeah.
right? And so God forbid what happens when you jump off the conveyor belt, like, like whatever.
I know.
But it's if you see, I mean, you can even think about it just like that. Like you saw somebody jump off the belt and they were fine.
Mhm.
They were more than fine actually. They were free.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
now you say, oh, okay, like I guess I can do that too. And we don't want to get into the we don't want to get into the mode of comparing ourselves to people or doing it because someone else did it, but it's always good to have proof that like it's not the end of the world if we start to shift things around. In fact, quite the opposite. Yeah.
Well, isn't that the whole point of coaching is like you've gone through it yourself and now you're sharing it and look, you're look, you're alive, you're okay. You look good. You're doing it.
Mhm.
I can see it on your face. You look happy. You know. So, yeah, you could do it. It
Yeah.
doesn't you don't have to follow the rules of what you're told from when you're a child because your parents didn't know, and that is the beauty of this whole space that we're in, and it amazes me every day when I read something from another coach or when I talk to someone who's sort of on that path of like deciding to take the leap, to make the shift, even if it's a tiny one. And you can see the change almost immediately. Like the energy around them changes. And it's like it's really it's like I don't know how anybody wouldn't want to work in this space. I don't know.
It's very rewarding.
Mhm.
um and I always say one of my like newer perspectives on it is that just like, how I'm always talking about co-regulation, right? Like beyond co-regulation, which is what we're literally talking about in this conversation of like having a community of people that are there for you to bounce your ideas around on, but also to help you get clear, right? And then I think even further beyond that is the co-creation that happens, which is also happening on our end.
Mhm.
And but so in other words, co-creation, right? Like it's a partnership. So even my newer perspective on it is that so if I am completely like filled up by what I do, which I am,
Mhm.
right? Like God forbid I have a career choice that I actually enjoy and that fills my cup as I'm filling my client's cup,
Yeah.
right? Like, what a concept. Why, like it doesn't have to be a struggle. In fact, if you're doing your purpose work, ideally it is not, especially or like if you're an artist, right? And you get to be, you get, which there's so many ways you can go about that. But that's my newer perspective is that client coach and client relationship is also a co-creation.
Yeah.
You are ideally I'm filling your cup. Ideally I am guiding you in ways that you potentially couldn't get from somewhere else.
Mhm.
I am setting an example of vulnerability and holding space, which is again not something that just poof comes is everywhere you look, right?
Mhm.
So providing all of these things, um, and at the same time, you as the client are helping me create the life I want by agreeing to work with me, by having an energetic and financial exchange with me.
Mhm.
So like we don't have to like be icky about the fact that like this is a business, although I, 100% every day, all day. I lead with my purpose and the business. This comes from another coach that I had on the show that I fucking love. Her name is Turbo Rainbow, or that's her, it's her thing. Um, she says she leads with her purpose and her business is the cape. And
Mhm.
I always loved that because
Yeah.
it's there and it gives you power, right? but it is not the entire, the entire package. But again, it's there, and it doesn't have to be icky when we make it, when there is a business associated with it, because that business is allowing me to create the vision of a life that I want.
Mhm.
So, and I am deserving of as well. So this is a co-creation that doesn't have to feel any kind of way. It's perfect, if you ask me. It's just perfect.
I love it. Yeah, for sure. 100%.
But like you said, like, who wouldn't wanna do this? So rewarding.
Yeah. It just it like you said, it fills the cup, for sure.
Um, but then there is also the aspect of, like we said in the beginning of this conversation, right? The fact that we both came to the space that we're in because of our experiences.
Mhm,
Similarly, experiences watching our family members struggle
mhm,
with their mental health, with addiction, with, go down the list, right? Friends, family, suffering,
mhm.
and ourselves at periods of
Yeah,
lives, that makes no sense. Periods of our lives.
we have more than one.
Um, but that being said, yeah, like, there's a reason that you come to this space, because you're a cycle breaker, because you don't you're like putting your foot down. Like, it is a little bit, as much as it's a little bit of tough love, it's like, listen, if you're not a part of the solution, little bit you're a part of the problem, because we got to start talking about this shit,
Mhm.
right? And even like, so actually, and that's a good, like, kind of just like closing sentence, right? Like, just think about for the people who are listening, right? Like, just think about opening up to a level of vulnerability, and therefore finding the people who can be on the receiving end of that, and just starting that discerning process. Because we're not over here trying to tell you you should go be a coach to change the world. There
No.
are, first of all, are a lot of different kinds of people who change the world, who every single day. But I really, that's a more subtle way. I think that that's like, just figuring out how, and in what way you can be your authentic self.
Mhm.
That's what shifts things, really, because then you can feel a little bit more comfortable talking about the things that you have strong values around.
Right.
And that in itself, that's like, that has influence, that has pull, that makes a difference. Doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm now an activist and I'm going to go run for office and so on and so forth. Just be you and start talking about the things that mean something to you. And if they look at you like you're an alien, then we understand that
Okay.
situation.
Yeah, and it's okay. And I feel like once you start to really be your authentic self, like live in that space, then if you wanna do bigger things, you can, and they'll I feel like it comes a little bit easier if you just start with who you are, being yourself, and being open to allowing things to come in. And after that, if you're always going to hit the speed bumps because trauma has a real fun way of coming back at you, just trying to test you and making sure are you sure you want to do this? Remember what happened last time? Well, that's okay that happened last time. It's not. It's. I'm not going to let it happen again. We're going to keep moving forward. So it's so easy. Just start at being who you are, whatever that might look like. And that can change too, by the way. Whatever it is now, it can change because things are ever changing. So you don't have to be stuck on, okay, this is who I am now. I mean, I think about how many times I've changed careers and how many times I've changed the way I wanted to be in this space because I'm ever evolving as I'm finding out more things, as I'm peeling back the layers. It's like, okay, mm, I can do this, but I think I should do it this way now. Like it's just all part of it. Everything is evolving. So just start here and then see where it goes from there.
Hmm. So important. One step at a time,
Mhm.
as they say. as they say in AA, which we can all learn a thing or two from AA. That's for damn sure.
I'm sure.
But I think that was like a perfect, like, end note. That was a perfect, like, bring it on home of, yeah, like we're going to come up against the trauma again and again. And while it doesn't sound like the most appetizing path, the fruits at the end of this
Mhm.
work are so delicious
Worth it. Yeah.
because it's so worth it to actually dig deeper
Mhm.
and allow like the full arc of this experience to play out. Because what we do is we cut ourselves off at the bit, and then we distract ourselves with something else.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I think yeah, and that is the way to actually persevere, as you basically what you just said, right? Like you persevere anyway, because that voice comes in and it says, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Right? You persevere, and that is the way that we stay connected to the truest self,
Mhm.
right? That first instinct, the instinct that actually draws you towards something. Yeah, listen to that voice,
Mhm.
shall we?
It's
Okay. This is it. I love you so much, my
love.
dear.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And maybe we'll do it again. And I'm just going to throw out there to anybody who's listening. We talked a lot about community. We talked a lot about having a circle, and especially, both of us I know have a sweet spot for working with women, and we're both mothers. So obviously we talk a lot about the struggles that there are associated with having that on our plate in addition to everything else. And I would just like to know if anybody has any feedback about around whether or not a community, an online community, and then maybe eventually an in-person meeting space for having these type of conversations would be useful, right? Because one of the things that we have been playing around with is that we need a village. We need that village back. We need support that is just there with open arms, as opposed to whether or not, whether or not we actually have genuine help, or if there's someone judging us on the other end, especially as women and mothers. So I would love to know if anybody listening to this feels like that would be useful, because we're kicking around some ideas.
Mhm.
So I want to thank you again. This has been real, and I hope to see you soon.
Yes.
And yeah, so if anybody loved this episode, go in and like it on YouTube or share. We're gonna have this uploaded to the podcast in a couple days, and we'll see you all soon.
Love you.